Well, good afternoon. This is Micah Young with Micah Young Podcast. Glad you could make it with us today. I always appreciate you watching these and listening to them. We're going to take right up with what we've been talking about with the relationship. And in the last podcast, we talked about the Father's purpose for relationship and then our part in living that out. His purpose for relationship is the same purpose for everything that he's created. And that is that it would be an expression of his glory. The heavens declare the glory of God. I don't want to try to sound pseudo-spiritual. So let me say this in another way. Anywhere that the will of God is obeyed, the glory of God is expressed. Let me say that again. Anywhere that the will of God is obeyed, the glory of God is expressed. The glory of God is not expressed in me coming up with my own ideas and my own agenda and then just asking God to bless it. He's not that desperate, and he never is excited about any of the stuff that we come up with. His ideas are always much better than ours. But anywhere that the will of God is obeyed, the glory of God is then expressed. The Father, just think about that. Now, the Father is glorified in my life anytime his will is obeyed. So it's counterproductive to say, I want the Father glorified and then continue to seek my own will. Well, it's the same in relationship. It's counterproductive to say, I want God to be glorified in all of my relationships and then continue to pursue our own agenda and to go into them for what they can do for us or how they make us feel. God desires that our relationships be an expression of his glory and who he is. He desires to express himself, his goodness, his holiness in every area of my life, including relationships. And that won't happen unless I make choices in line with his will. See, even relationships are not about me, not about getting what I want. They're about how can God be revealed and how can his glory be expressed in my life. His heart is that what we receive from him in our relationship with him be carried into and expressed in our relationships with others. Let me say that again. His heart is that what we receive from him in our relationship with him be carried into and expressed in our relationship with others. He provides everything we need to fulfill our part in a healthy relationship. Now, let me just say up front, it takes two to have a relationship. And sometimes not both parties are interested in expressing the glory of God. But I can still be the one that chooses to be obedient to the Father and allow his glory to be expressed in this relationship in and through me. So you might ask yourself, well, what do I bring to relationships? Now, I'm going to share this with you. What I'm about to share applies to regardless of who the relationship is with. Whether it's a believer, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a family member, whether it's an atheist, regardless of the race, this applies. What you can bring applies to any relationship that God leads us into. Here it is. The most valuable thing I can bring to any relationship is a personal, living, vital, honest relationship with Christ. I want to say that again because that's key. The most valuable thing I can bring to any relationship is a personal, living, vital, honest relationship with Christ. And it doesn't matter what the other person does. Don't get caught up in that. I will if you will. I don't determine it by how the other person responds. I determine it by God's purpose for my heart and God's purpose for me in this relationship. And his desire that I be an expression of him comes out of a personal, living, vital relationship with Christ. Now this helps me first to cut through the weeds and find out if I really do have an all-inclusive relationship with Christ, or if I have a compartmentalized relationship. Is my relationship with Christ the kind that plays out in every area of my life? Or is it just something I break out on Sunday or when I am around certain people? Is my relationship with Christ the compass of my life from which all my choices are made, or just someone I go to when my comfort zone is disturbed? Does my relationship with Christ consist of genuine fellowship and intimacy? Or is it just a list of rules and principles and laws, favorite scriptures, and religious traditions? Listen, people aren't turned off by Christ, but many, including myself, are resistant to religion. So we have to ask, is my relationship with Christ include every area of my life? Is it vital? Is it living? Is it relevant? Is it something that I operate out of as much as I possibly can? Are my decisions made from my relationship with Christ, or am I still out seeking my own will? Listen, Jesus did not come with a new religion. Man has tried to make one out of it for 2,000 years and has done a pretty deplorable job at it. But he's tried to make what Jesus did and who he was and what he said and what he expressed into religion. And it is powerless, it is manipulative, it is destructive to people, and it's not what he intended at all. Jesus came to present to man the revelation of the Father that he had received from the Father. He did just what we've talked about here. Jesus had revelation of who the Father was, time he had spent with him before creation, and he came to present that revelation to man. That he had received, he was coming now to give to man. Not just list, not just rules, but to show forth through his life the excellencies of the Father and what he was like in relationship and what we could have in a relationship with him. Wasn't just rules, wasn't just regulations, wasn't just laws. He came to express, he came to show forth how excellent the Father was and what he was like in a relationship, and that we could have that relationship, not just to declare it, but to demonstrate it. And then, as we talked about last week, Jesus said to the Father, as you sent me into the world, as you sent me to be this expression, as you sent me to be an expression of your goodness and your love and your kindness and your graciousness, as you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. And then in the next verse, he says, not to just these alone, talking about the disciples, but for those who believe in me through their word, that they may be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. Do you think maybe it's not just declaring the gospel to the world that Jesus had in mind, but do you think maybe it was to demonstrate the gospel to the world by allowing Christ to rule in me, by allowing Christ to reveal the Father the same way he did, and to bring glory to him? I think so. Now, here's some things that Jesus demonstrated that I believe he wants us to show forth, especially in relationships. Here's the first one. It's kind of two parts. He revealed to us that God is present and that he can be known personally and intimately. I believe that was critical. He wanted them to see that God was not just far away in heaven, isolated from mankind, or in some distant temple. And he really saw that whenever he was crucified in the temple, the veil was torn in two, and they looked in there and there was no glory. There was no glory in that temple because they had just crucified it on a cross. That's where the glory of God resided. And he says he's intimate, he's relevant, he's here with you, he says in John. He's here with you and he will be in you. That's how intimate he is. That's how close he is. That's how present he is. And he said, you can fellowship with him directly. Jesus was in constant connection with the Father and receiving from him what the Father wanted him to do, showing him what the Father wanted him to do, telling him what the Father wanted him to say. That's the fellowship that Jesus demonstrated. He says, you don't need someone like Moses to go to God and hear God for you and then come back and tell you what he says. You don't need that anymore. You can hear from him personally. You can fellowship with him personally and intimately. You can talk to him rather than just talk about him. He is approachable. You can hear from him directly, not just read it, not just what somebody else says, but you personally can hear from him directly. One time in John 12, God, in talking to Jesus, spoke audibly. Now, God does that. I've heard of that. I don't think God's ever spoken to me audibly, but he's spoken to me louder than that from my spirit. But in this particular case, God spoke to Jesus audibly. And then Jesus said, this voice has not come for my sake, but for your sakes. He wants you to know that he still speaks personally. He wants you to know that you can have this intimate fellowship with him. Just two things, that he's present and that you can have fellowship with him. Now imagine bringing that kind of awareness into any relationship, where you come into this relationship and you are intimate with the Father. You're living in his presence. You know how to touch him. You know how to hear from him. You know how to fellowship with him. And it's not just something that's compartmentalized where you have a little over here and a little over there. It's your heart to do that all the time. You may not do it yet, but that's your heart to do it. And that's what you're pursuing. Not in religious terms, not in some vocabulary, that Christian vocabulary, not in rules or rituals, but being a demonstration of God being present and that he can be known personally, intimately in our daily lives without any of the religious trappings and judgments that come through religion. Imagine coming into any relationship with that posture, that you want to be an expression of God's glory in this relationship. You're not after what you want. You're not after what you can get. You're not after how it makes you feel, but you're after being an expression of the glory of God into this relationship, whatever it looks like. It's not about me. This, I believe, is the first thing I bring into any relationship. I'm bringing into this relationship not just information, but I'm bringing into this relationship as best as I can walk it out. And as he strengthens me to do it, I want to be a demonstration of who Christ is and what he wants us to see and know. What a difference. What a change. But I believe that's the most valuable thing that we have when we come into relations. And it doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what the other person does. I have determined in my heart that I want to be an expression of God's glory in an intimate relationship on a daily basis, and the way I treat people and the way I respond to life as a demonstration to this person that I have a relation or I'm entering into a relationship with. Christ did that. He did it. He batted 1,000 at it. Trust me, we don't bat 1,000. But you know what? We keep showing up to bat. We keep showing up to do that. And when we blow it, we thank God for forgiving us, going back in and be that expression. Relationships are messy. All of us come into relationships with baggage. The question is, am I going to let getting my needs met, having me feel a certain way, be more valuable to me than being an expression to this person of the glory of God by seeking to obey Him in every aspect of our relationship? Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you watch us on YouTube, you can subscribe. You'll get a notification when the next one comes out. It'll be on Facebook as well. And if you like what you've seen, just click like. And it's interesting. Someone showed me the other day there were about 65 likes, 65 views, and no likes. And I thought, that's kind of strange. We watched it, but we didn't like it. So anyway, if you like it, just click like. That kind of lets us know what your perspective is on it. And if you just want to listen to it and not watch it, you can go to Apple Podcasts and you can listen to it while you're driving down the road. I encourage you not to try to watch it while you're driving down the road or operating heavy equipment. So Lord bless you. Have a good day.